Hello and welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
And I'm Matthew Lucas, and we post a video every Friday, so do hit subscribe if you want to follow our continuing adventures.
And if you've got a garden question, put it in the comments below. Tell me where you're from for context, and we will try and answer it on our 60-second shorts on a Monday.
Well, we won't, you will.
Yeah.
I'll just read it out because that's all I do. But Stephen, it's a very brisk autumn day. We're upon Mount Macedon.
Yes.
What's up today?
All right, well, we're in a friend's garden. It's called Shepherd's Bush, and it's probably one of the highest properties on Mount Macedon. It had an old house on it many years ago that burnt down just prior to the Ash Wednesday bushfires in 1983. And I remember the old house. It was a lovely old weatherboard with sweeping verandas around it and what have you. And at the time, it was a bit neglected. It was used as a weekender. So it had some beautiful big old trees, but the garden had been basically let go to rack and ruin. After the fires, my friends Kevin and Chris bought the property, started gardening it, built their own home on it, which they've done beautifully. It sets into the landscape superbly, and have gardened furiously ever since. So it quite literally is a phoenix that arose from the ashes, so to speak.
And what are we going to look at particularly? It's looking gorgeous.
All right, well, I want to look at a selection of really good autumn colouring plants.
Okay.
Because I think autumn colour in the cooler climates is so important. We're going into winter when things will be drab and grey. So let's go out with a bang and look at some really high-end, beautiful autumn colouring shrubs, trees and others.
Let's go. Well, we need to go no further than right behind us because this caught my eye.
And
what
it's fabulous.
is going on here?
All right, well, this is one of the multitudes of deciduous Berberis that are out there.
Yeah.
This one's Berberis thunbergii Helmond Pillar, so it has a fairly vertical form. This one's been allowed to sort of flop out a fair bit, so although it's still got vertical stems, in my own garden I've actually tied mine in to make a very narrow pillar.
Is that the one?
Yes,
right.
So it can grow in slightly different forms depending on how you treat it.
Yeah.
And you get little yellow flowers in spring, burgundy foliage right through the summer, and then this fabulous scarlety red as it turns in the autumn with its little red berries.
And the berries are stunning. They're like little lacquer beads.
Yes,
it's
very pretty.
So red. It's extraordinary. So where is this from?
Well, the Berberises of this particular ilk are European. Vulgaris and thunbergii both come from Europe, and they're two of the most popular Berberis that have thrown up all sorts of different forms, cultivars, dwarf ones, gold ones, burgundy ones, upright ones, you name it, they've found them.
Now, it's here on Mount Macedon, so in terms of hardiness, obviously it can take quite cold temperatures.
It can go down to as cold as you like. You can grow it in Canada, you can grow it in northern Europe. They'll go to, heat's not bad, they're not bad with heat, they just don't like one of those sort of really hot days and a hot wind blowing through them, they can burn. But otherwise a pretty tough shrub.
And really, a lot of the Berberis have amazing autumn colour, don't they?
Yeah.
And we have actually made a Berberis epic.
And we're going to link it so that you can
up
have
there.
Up there,
and
yes.
in fact, and in one case, actually, there was a hedge of them, which was just stunning, I think.
Yes, that was at Dale's garden.
Yeah, it was. All right, let's go to the next.
All right, let's go.
So this just leaps out at you. Goodness me.
We've hit this just at the right moment. This is a remarkably beautiful North American shrub called Fothergilla. And we've actually got two Fothergillas in the garden here. There's two main species. So this one is Fothergilla major, which has the biggest leaf. And down the path a little bit further, we've got Fothergilla gardenii, which has a smaller leaf and tends to be a little bit taller growing. So there's the differences between the two. Now, these shrubs have lots of other things going for them too, I might add. They're one of the world's great autumn colouring shrubs, obviously, but they get beautiful white flowers in the spring. You can see where the flowers were on that stem there, and they're little white fluffy flower heads on it. So you've got these interesting white fluffy flowers in the spring, then you've got the good autumn foliage, and the autumn colour varies depending on how much light the particular shrub gets. So if you look at the ones at the top end of this here,
redder.
It's quite red. Where it goes back into more shade, they tend to go bright golds. So the colour can vary depending on where you plant it. They rarely grow more than about 2 metres tall, so they're not a big growing shrub. Slightly suckery habit, so they'll sort of thicken up from the bottom. And I think they are just remarkable shrubs, and you don't see them planted much.
So where are they from? What conditions do they need?
North American, cool climate. They like cool, moist soils. They grow better in the northern parts of North America. You're not going to grow these in Texas or Florida, I shouldn't think. And they do very well in Britain. They cope with the conditions there superbly. We can only grow them well in Australia in the hill gardens, so they'd have to be Mount Macedon, Dandenongs, those sorts of areas. I'd be very surprised if these would do at all well in suburban Melbourne, although I'd like to be proved wrong.
Oh, I would like to prove you wrong too, because I love them.
Yes,
well,
so Fothergilla, there we go.
On to the next.
Let's go.
So many showstoppers.
Oh yes,
Ah.
yes. I do love a really good golden yellow, and this plant takes some
extraordinary.
tossing.
And it's just like a waterfall.
It is, it's
not
beautiful.
a waterfall, a fountain.
Yes, yes, a waterfall's quite a different thing. This is a shrub that you don't see used terribly much in Australia. I've seen it a lot more overseas, but this is a plant that until quite recently was called Stephanandra tanakae. It has now been lumped into the genus Neillia, so it's Neillia tanakae, and it is an arching deciduous shrub of Asian origin. Grows to, this one looks taller than it actually is because it's up on a bank. But normally around about the 2 metre mark. Beautiful foamy archy branches. It has tiny white flowers in midsummer in clusters, and we'll show you the dead flower spikes.
Oh yeah.
Not terribly exciting, but the flowers are pretty in summer. When its foliage is shed, in the winter the bare arching branches have quite nice coppery bark on them.
Oh, yeah.
So particularly the younger canes, and so in the winter it still has some presence in the garden. So very useful plant, doesn't like to be too hot and dry, so a slightly sheltered spot would suit it best, and somewhere where it doesn't get really dry in the summer, but otherwise it's completely cold hardy, not a particularly difficult shrub to grow.
And it's under 2 oaks, so it's very sheltered, so it's quite shade loving.
Yeah, well, it will cope with the shade quite well, but it doesn't need it. Certainly up here, it could grow perfectly happily out in a fairly open, sunny spot as well.
And I guess because this bank is probably about 80 centimetres tall, it's elevated. So actually, it really is a great place to plant.
Oh, yes, yes. It shows itself off superbly up on this rise in the garden. It's been planted in bulk, so there's 3 or 4 plants of it in there. So it's really making quite a statement.
It's stunning. This
Yes.
garden has amazing things.
Yes. Well, we haven't finished yet.
Come on then.
Let's go.
What's next, Stephen?
Well, you don't sort of think conifer and autumn colour in the same breath as a rule, but behind us here is a stunning young specimen of European larch, Larix decidua, and the name says it all. It's a deciduous larix, so there you go. And in the autumn they can go the most fabulous shades of yellow before they shed, and of course they also have the bonus of having that very symmetrical conifery shape about them.
Now, you just don't see them very often in Australia. I've never seen one in autumn, for example. So why is that? Do they need cooler conditions and they won't grow in Melbourne?
No, they're not a tree I would recommend for Melbourne. I'm yet to find anybody that's growing a good larch in Melbourne. So they like those crisp autumn days, the cool weather. Of course, they come from very cold parts of Europe, so they want that cold to really colour them up well in the autumn.
Yeah.
So really, yes, again, they're the sort of thing that you'll see used a lot in Europe and North America, but very rarely in Australia. Only in the hill gardens like here do larches really perform well.
Well, how lucky are we that it's absolutely perfect today.
It is. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous tree. And of course, the thing about deciduous conifers, or the other thing, is the fact that when they break into foliage in the spring, they generally come out an almost eye-aching shade of green, that really lively sort of colour. So they go through an interesting array of shades throughout the year, from their spring foliage through to their mature summer foliage, and then into their autumnal glory.
So is that the only deciduous conifer?
No. There's a number of deciduous conifers. There's certainly a number of different larches, so the genus itself includes more than just the European larch. There's Japanese larch and so forth, North American. But there's swamp cypresses, the taxodiums, which tend to go wonderful russety reds in the autumn. There's the metasequoia, the dawn redwood, which colours beautifully in the autumn as well. So there's a number, and of course the ginkgo is classed as sort of a conifer relative as well.
That's right.
And it goes bright yellow in the autumn. So there's many conifers, and I've probably missed a few of them, that are in fact deciduous, but they are certainly the minority in the group.
All right, well, this garden is just revealing more and more beauty. What's next?
Oh, we'll go find you something else.
Well, Stephen, we're not gorillas in the mist, but we're gardeners in the hydrangeas.
Yes, we definitely are.
But
Yes.
this is not what we're looking at.
No, in fact, it's what is right between us that we're looking at. And this is one of Asia's great autumn colouring plants. This is a thing called Lindera obtusiloba. And Lindera is quite a large genus, and there's evergreen ones, deciduous ones, all sorts of different leaf shapes. This, I think, is one of the premier deciduous species. And it goes the most fabulous yellow through to red in the autumn foliage. So its foliage is stunning. In the winter, when it's bare, it gets little tiny yellow, mustardy coloured sort of spidery flowers on it, but it's not showing any sign of those yet.
In winter?
Fact, in winter when it's bare.
Oh.
But one of the fascinating things about this plant is that it has leaves of 4 different shapes.
Yeah.
So you'll get some leaves that are heart-shaped.
Oh, yes.
So there's a heart-shaped one.
Yeah.
You'll get some leaves that have 2 lobes, one on either side.
Yeah.
Then you will get right-handed mittens and left-handed mittens. So you have some with a lobe on one side and some with the lobe on the other side. So you get 4 different leaf shapes on the one tree, which makes it entertaining.
Razzle dazzle.
Yes.
Now, here we are, Mount Macedon. What's its preferred conditions?
All right. Again, it will do better in the cooler climates. It likes a deep acid mountain soil,
Yeah.
cool root run, plenty of light, but not really stinking hot sun in the summer. And having said all of that, Kevin, one of the owners of this property, tells me that he's had 4 of these in the garden. They've all taken off like rockets and done really well. And now he's down to 1. One after the other, they've just faded out for no apparent reason. So we don't know what's caused it. I've got no idea. But it will always be one of those trees that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to grow. It's also a bit of a challenge to propagate because there are boy and girl forms. And in Australia, we don't seem to have both sexes. So we have to propagate them from cuttings. And they don't really like being propagated from cuttings. So it's always going to be one of those choice collector's plants that basically is for the hill garden.
There you go. Well, it's stunning. And again, we are so lucky. This is just the perfect week, isn't it?
Oh yes, we've copped it really well this time around. Our timing is absolutely perfect.
Okay, I think there's one more, is there not?
Yes, there's one more. We've got to go and have a look at another plant of importance in this garden.
Okay. Well, Stephen, time to rest our weary feet.
Yes, and engage with something else. Now this time we're not looking at a shrub or a tree, but behind us here are is a colony of quite handsome hostas, which are starting to go into their winter dormancy, and they often do go quite pretty yellows and coppery colours before they die down. So they do make an impact in the autumn garden, as they obviously do in the summer garden when they're in full leaf.
And I guess perennials, they just have a bit of a shorter window because essentially it's dying.
Yes.
I mean, as is a leaf, but they can look quite dead.
Yes.
You've got to capture the moment when they're still...
Yeah, when they're still looking at least colourful. Yeah, so there you go.
But and I can't remember what film it is, but we were also looking at some tree peonies do have a beautiful autumn leaf as well, although that's not really perennial, is it? It's a shrub.
Yeah, that's more a shrub as well. But even some of the herbaceous peonies can colour quite nicely before they go down. And there are any number of herbaceous perennials that do have quite good autumn colour. And we might have to do a whole video on that at one stage.
Why not? Because there are some euphorbias that do that.
Yep.
There are some epimediums that do that.
Yes, yeah, there's any number actually. There's a whole story in there.
Okay.
So let's have a look at some more.
Watch this space. But we can't watch this space anymore because there's something else that I saw that we need to look at now.
All right, let's go. Well, Matthew, we can't ignore climbing plants when it comes to autumn colour as well. And we just happened to find this very good young specimen of the climbing, well, I can't say the climbing, one of the climbing hydrangeas, probably the most commonly available around the world. This is Hydrangea petiolaris, which is a deciduous self-clinging climber. So it's attached itself to this brickwork, comes from Japan and parts of Asia, and gets white lace cap flowers in summer, which are very, very pretty. Then you get this lovely yellow autumnal foliage as the autumn comes in. And in the winter when it's bare, its coppery stems make quite an interesting tracery all the way up the wall. So I think it's a climber that has interest and effect in the garden all year round. Of course, being a hydrangea, it likes a semi-shaded to shaded aspect. So in the northern hemisphere, perhaps a northerly wall. In the southern hemisphere, the opposite. Moist root system, but it doesn't like to be wet and soggy. And it's not particularly fussy about soil type per se. It doesn't really matter whether it's acidic or alkaline, but a good leafy soil suits it well. And then leave it to do its own thing as much as possible. And don't cut branches off that come out from the plant, because that's where the flowers will sit. So if you prune it flat against the wall, you'll never get a flower in your climbing hydrangea.
Last cab off the rank, Stephen.
And we've just caught it. We should have been here a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
But then we wouldn't have seen everything else.
Well, that's true, exactly. Now, this plant behind us with only a few red leaves left on it is a plant from China and Japan called Disanthus cercidifolius. Now, the Disanthus is in the same family as the witch hazels and all that group of plants.
Ah, you can see that from the flower.
Yeah, so it's in that Hammermalidaceae family. It's a monotypic genus, so it's one species in the genus, and it makes a small tree or large fanny shrub. The little tiny burgundy winter flowers are cute, and they sit back to back on a stem, which is really weird. It's got a very strange arrangement, but it's about its autumn foliage that's important. And this has been colouring, it's now virtually finished, but this has been colouring for probably a month and a half. So as far as the autumn colour stakes are concerned, Disanthus has to be up there with one of the most long-lasting of the autumn foliage shrubs. And it will generally be paler where it's shadier, so in the centre of the plant it will come out sort of soft yellows, and then it will go through apricots, then it will go through scarlets, and then it will end up as burgundies on the tip. So you get almost the whole gamut of autumn colours all on the one little tree.
It's stunning.
Yep.
And it's in bloom now,
Yeah.
and I would have thought perhaps they would have been fragrant, but they're not at all.
No, there doesn't seem to be any perfume to it at all. Disanthus hasn't bothered.
Well, Stephen, what a wonderful garden full of the most incredible autumn foliage.
It was fabulous, wasn't it? And we're so lucky to have access to this garden. So thank you to Kevin and Chris at Shepherd's Bush, Mount Macedon, for allowing us access to their garden and to see some of their wonderful autumn foliage plants.
Unbelievable, and we are literally, I think, in the very peak of the peak week to be here today, so thank you very much. The gods were smiling on us too.
Yeah, the weather wasn't too bad, so
filming our autumn foliage today. Well, if you want to know what we're doing next week, you'll have to hit subscribe.
And don't forget, we do our Monday shorts, so please send me messages, send me questions.
I would just send in questions,
Yeah,
not messages.
no, messages perhaps not. And I will see if I can answer any of your gardening questions in our 60-second Monday shorts.
You will, but until then, we look forward to seeing you next Friday.
All right, bye all.